most are ready. So question for you guys in here. Do you want lights on or off? Off? Okay, off it is. All right. Hopefully you guys on Zoom are good to go. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to run through this contract. And like I said, I'm mostly going to talk about the lines where we're filling stuff in. I occasionally might reference something else. But if you have questions, please stop me. The whole idea of this class is to help you get comfortable and familiar with filling out the contract. Now, we actually did a study. This was a number of years ago, but we actually did a study trying to figure out what was the difference between people who made it in real estate and the ones who didn't, because the failure rate in real estate is really, really high. And what we found actually is that what it boiled down to is how quickly can you get an agent in front of a real potential client and fill out the contract? Because typically what we found, most agents, the thing that holds them back the most is the fear of having to fill this out. And what am I getting? What if I do it wrong? And the reason for that is because, again, at the top, we've already talked about this on the listing stuff, but this is a legally binding real estate purchase contract. And Utah law requires real estate licensees to use this form. You know, then it does go on to say buyer and seller, however, could agree to delete and add and whatever. But what I've found, though, is that the thing that typically holds most agents back is the fear of having to fill this out keeps them then from actually prospecting and getting a client because they're afraid what happens if I have to fill it out. Because in real estate school, did they teach you how to be a real estate agent?
No.
What did they teach you? Yeah, basically how to pass the test. They taught you how to pass the test. Even in cosmetology, I don't know if that's the correct term anymore, but even in cosmetology, they have to do so many hours of cutting hair before they'll let you go cut someone's hair. And you know what the difference between a good haircut and a bad haircut is? No, like 6 weeks. Yeah, like that's it. But yet they'll make them go practice cutting hair, but they'll give you a real estate license without you ever even writing a contract for anybody. Like, makes no sense. But so my objective of today is to help you feel comfortable with it so that when the time comes to do it, you can be like, okay, I got this. I know what to do. All right. So here's where we're going to start. Is I'm just going to, when we get to each section, I'm going to stop and ask you guys if you have any concerns with it. So on this 9th day of October 2017, now, other than the fact that it says 2017, if it said, you know, September or whatever today is, or yesterday, 26, 2022, any concerns with that?
It doesn't match with the time of the house was being sold. It was 2015, or it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was gonna say, from that standpoint, let's just pretend the house was on the market for 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so but any concerns with the date that's in here? Shouldn't be, right? Okay, so now here's what I want to say though, is when you're filling this out, put in whatever the date is that you're filling out the contract. That's not as important to me as what it says right after here in parentheses, where it says, I got a point for the people on Zoom, right here, offer reference date. Here's the thing with this. Anytime after this, that the contract makes a reference to offer reference date, it's referring to this date, the date that you had put on the contract right here. Okay? Now, so as you fill out addendums and counteroffers, on the addendum or counteroffer, it says the purchase contract with an offer reference date of, that's the date you're going to put in. Now, the reason I bring that up is because let's say that I wrote this on the 9th of October, but then my client didn't sign it till the 10th of October. So what would be the offer reference date? The 9th or the 10th?
It would be the 10th, the day you signed it, right?
No, it's going to be the 9th
Okay.
because of the fact that it says on this October 9th, and then in parentheses offer reference date. So what you're going to do then is anytime you did an addendum or a counteroffer, you're going to put October 9th on this contract. Make sense?
So will that be correct that it has a different date from that to the signing?
Nope, doesn't matter. Yeah.
Okay.
Because, and we're just saying on this 9th of October, 2017, then therefore throughout the rest of the contract, the offer reference date. So anytime it says offer reference date, it's pointing back to this date. Okay, all right. So next, we've got Billy Bob Buyer. Any concerns there?
Just a question, if it should also include his wife, if she's on title.
Okay, good. So great question. Yes. So in the event that he's married and has a spouse going to be on the contract, the spouse would go, name should be there as well.
So is it common name or and?
I usually just do and. Yeah. So, but let's talk further on that. So how do you decide who you're going to put there? So how do you decide if it is a husband and wife or if it's just the one person?
You can go to the
Tax record.
tax records or a family.
So on the,
preliminary.
when they're selling the property, we would want to go to the tax records, but at this point, there's no tax records for who the buyer is. So what did you say?
You have to ask.
Oh, did you say ask?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you're gonna ask them, but I would even take it to a little bit different than that. Here's how I like to do it, is who is gonna be on the loan? Well, first off is, are they paying cash or are they getting a loan? If they're getting a loan, who is gonna be on the loan? And that's what we wanna put in here. Now, in addition to that, so the reason I put in here Billy Bob Buyer, what if his name really was William Robert Buyer? So I want to put the name that he is going to get the loan in. So if the loan is going to be in Billy Bob, then put Billy Bob. If it's going to be in William Robert, then you want to put William Robert as the name of the buyer. Okay?
So you put the same name that is on the ID.
Well, not necessarily on the ID, because it may not be, it may be different than what their name on the ID is. I mean, probably not. It probably will match. But ultimately, what we want to do is just find out, have they applied for the loan? If they have applied for the loan, what was the name they did it in? So really, here's the best thing to do, is get a copy of the pre-approval letter. And once you have the pre-approval letter, it should have the names of who's going to be on the loan right there. And I want to put it in here to match what's going to be on the loan. And the reason for that is the mortgage company is going to want to have the names on the contract match how they applied for the loan. Now, it hasn't been as, like, I haven't heard as much about that recently, but like, and where this comes from, actually, let me give you kind of the background of that. After 2008, what happened was tons and tons of people were defaulting on their mortgages. Well, what happens if somebody defaults on their mortgage? What happens to the bank who has that loan?
Foreclosure.
Well, yeah. So the bank's gonna end up foreclosing, and then typically what's gonna happen though, does the bank make money when they foreclose on a property usually?
No,
No, they're probably gonna lose money. Are they in the business of losing money?
no.
No.
So if they're gonna lose money, what do you think they would want to do?
They sue, collect the money.
They want, yeah, so basically they want to limit it as much as they can. So what they then started to do is these mortgage servicers would go back to whoever originated the loan, and they wanted to look at it and see, can we find any mistakes they did when they originated the loan?
Right.
And if they did, then they could go back to the loan origination company
Yeah.
and say, you're responsible for this loss.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Okay.
So because of that, the mortgage companies now, these loan originators, so like Inspiro really is they're originating these loans. What's going to happen then is their underwriter wants to make sure that the names match, because if it said William or Billy Bob, but his name, the loan was really in William Robert, then if something bad happens on that loan, they get foreclosed on, they're going to come back and go, you didn't do this right. Therefore, you get to take the loss.
Like you have to have a good communication with the letter too.
Yeah.
So to match all the information.
Yeah, so yeah, very good. So let me just repeat what you said for the people on Zoom. Is she just said you got to have good communication with the lender to match, and that's just it. Is that's why I'm saying if you can get the pre-approval letter, it should have their names on it to where you can just put that in the contract right there. Now you know you've got it. Now, what if I don't? What if they haven't been pre-approved yet, and whatever, you know, they called me up, said, yes, we found this property, we want to buy it.
ask them what they would probably use.
Yeah, that's probably what I would do is just say, okay, what's the name you're going to apply for the loan in? What's that gonna look like? Now, worst case scenario, if you messed up and you put Billy Bob and you found out later on that it was William Robert, what can you do? Yeah, just do an addendum and fix it. So it's like, just keep in mind, like, don't panic and be like, oh, I can't write an offer until I know. Like, just write the offer and then just know you might have to later on go back and do an addendum and it'll be okay. All right. Offers to purchase from, then we've got Sally Sue Seller. Where do I get the name of the seller?
Tax records.
Okay, so you could go to tax records. Most of the time it's right, but not always.
Because on top of-
Go to the title, do it quick.
Okay, so here's how I do it. One of two things. Number one, hopefully the agent has put the name on the MLS. So on the MLS, it has a seller section and it should have the name. Not always will it. And if it doesn't, then at that point, what I do is I usually am going to call the seller, the selling agent, not the seller, sorry, the listing agent, and ask the listing agent, what do you, I will call them and say, hey, my client is thinking about writing an offer on your property, or we are going to be writing an offer, whatever it is. And I need to get a few things from you. And I'll point out the things that I ask along the way to the seller. But before I'm going to write the offer, I usually am going to call and just say, what's the name you want me to put on there? So if it's on the MLS, I'm probably just going to use what they put in the MLS. But if not, then I'm going to call and just say, hey, what name do you want me to put there? Again, in the event you can't figure any of that out, as a worst case scenario, you could put oh shoot, owner of record. Yeah, thank you. I was like going blank on it. So not necessarily the ideal, but you could do that. Okay. All right. What if it's in the name of a trust?
For the administrator.
Okay.
There's somebody in charge of.
Okay, good. I was kind of throwing a little bit of a trick question at you there. If we're representing the buyer only, not representing the seller, then we're just going to put the name of the trust and I'm not really going to worry about anything beyond that. Okay. The title company will, they'll want to have that, but okay, good. So they're going to offer to buy the property and going to give earnest money in the amount of $1,000. Any concerns with that for what you guys saw as you went through this?
For this time, that $1,000, you say what?
Okay, so Luz is saying maybe that's a little bit low of an earnest money. Okay.
Is it necessary to have the number of the check?
Okay, good. So let's go on to the next section. Says in the form of personal check and then put the check number. So no, it's not necessary to have that. However, for me personally, the way I was trained, that's how we always did it. And times have changed a bit now, meaning like, how often are we getting personal checks for earnest money?
We would rather not get personal checks for earnest money.
Just because there's that 10-day gap until actually.
Yeah, good. So do you guys, so that's the key thing on that is if we get that and for some reason the contract cancels, we're not just giving the earnest money back, even though the contract says to, until after a 10-day window, because we got to make sure the check really clears. Okay. So it's not necessarily the ideal way to do it. Okay. All right. Any other questions, concerns on that section? Okay, we're going to drop down then. So offer to purchase. So the property, any concerns on the address here? Okay, yeah. I don't think there's anything that would be concerning based on that. So you're just going to put in obviously the street name or the house number, the street name, the city, the county, the zip code, the tax ID number, all of that. Okay. All right. Any concerns then in section 1.2?
Yeah, I found that the refrigerator was excluded, right?
Okay.
And yet it says it's included.
Okay. So the MLS printout that you guys have says the refrigerator is excluded, but in section 1.2, the box is checked for included.
They're asking for it.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. And here's the key thing on this. The reason that I did this, that I put it on there as excluded and put it here as included, is to have this two pieces of a conversation with it. Is number one is because it says it's excluded, that's what they're recommending, I guess. Think of it no different as the purchase price is, this is what we want. The actual purchase contract is what's gonna rule, though. So even though they said it, they were gonna exclude it, if you put it on here, and the whole reason I did this and to have this conversation is, if you as an agent, here's what typically happens. You're really excited because you've listed this property. You get an offer in on the property. And let's be real for a minute. What's the first thing you look at when you get it? And maybe you guys haven't had this happen yet, but if you have, you get an offer in on your listing. What's the first thing you look to see?
Price,
The price. And why?
money.
Yeah, because we want to see, okay, is my seller gonna accept this offer? What's the second thing you look at? Yes. The second thing agents do is go to, okay, first is the price. Am I gonna be able to get this deal closed or to happen? Yes, okay, when? And we want to see when we're gonna get paid, right? So we look then next to see that. So here's what I'm saying is ultimately, as exciting as it is to get an offer in and be able to look at it and see, yes, it's a good offer. They're going to probably accept it or they'll counter and we'll probably be able to put it together. And yes, I'm going to get paid next month and I'll be able to pay my bills. I'm so excited. Yes. In addition to that, though, stop and make sure you look over the rest of the stuff, because what's going to happen if the seller said exclude the refrigerators, you get the offer in and all you looked at was price and closing date and you're like, great, let's go talk to the seller. The seller most likely is never going to catch that it says refrigerators are included. So now it comes to closing. We sign, the seller moves out, they take the refrigerator, the buyer shows up and says, whoa, wait a minute.
You're buying a refrigerator.
Yeah, all of a sudden you were so excited to pay your bills and now you got to buy a new refrigerator or something. So if you don't want to get in that habit, make sure you check this stuff. So that's why I put that on there. Second piece to this is, notice there's an S at the end, refrigerators. So sometimes what will happen is an agent will go list a property and the seller will say, yeah, we'll include the refrigerator that's in the basement or that's in the garage or the wherever, but we're going to take the other one that's in the kitchen. Well, if this box was checked like this, which one did they include?
All of them.
Yeah, all of them. Exactly right. So just again, keep in mind as you have those discussions. And so I remember I told you guys, I think I said this on the listing, the exclusive right to sell listing agreement, that I had said to you guys, as you go through it, tell the seller, if you've got things you're not going to include in the sale of the property, just get them out. Well, that might not necessarily work on a fridge. Like they probably still need a fridge. And so they're probably not going to be able to do that. So that's the reason I use this, but just keep in mind, every one of those says washers, dryers, refrigerators, microwave ovens, they're all plural. So if there is more than one in the property and that box is checked, they're asking for all.
So if they have a provision, like you said, one is staying in the first floor and the other is something different in there. Do we need an addendum or we can use the specified thing?
Yeah, great question. So if they were going to leave one and take one, then typically what I would say is, yeah, check the box here and you could specify about
Okay.
the one in the, but I would even put like the brand, you know, the LG in the kitchen is excluded, or well, they would put the excluded down here actually, but you know, I would detail out a little bit more, you know, the avocado green fridge will be left. Something like that. All right, we got something in the chat box. Let me see what we got. Oh, cool. Allie's just answering questions. Thanks, Allie. All right. Next, so are we good on the included items?
Yeah, I just have a comment. Or maybe
Yeah.
your thoughts. I was trained that you're not allowed to leave any blanks. That's one of the laws. right?
Yeah, so, well, it's not really a law, but I actually agree. So thank you for saying that. The way I was trained as a new agent too, is my broker said, put like a circle in each of the ones that you're not doing and an X. If you're saying, yes, it's included, put an X. And if there's a blank line, put NA or something. I think that is a good rule of thumb, because then you don't miss something.
I think I meant to say statute, not law, but it's a statute, right?
Oh, I don't know, actually.
So
It may be, yeah. How often do you see though, people just leave it blank?
There you go, like, the other thing
Yeah.
that I wanted to point out
Yes,
is like the most common tag that I do every single day is section 1.2 other missing check mark. So they'll have like, the
oh,
stove is included or something like that, but they don't have the check mark.
okay, good,
So
yes.
always just check.
Thank you.
Just check mark that.
Yeah, so just
Yeah.
what she's saying, just to make sure you guys understand is. People will put stuff on this line, but they don't ever check the box right here.
Oh, with the oil.
So make sure if you're gonna write on this line, anything besides NA,
Mhm.
check the box. Perfect, thank you. And then you'll notice here in this section, it has there either are or are not additional items of personal property. So if you are gonna do stuff like that, then put that in there. Okay, so let's see. Oh, thanks, Shannon. Shannon said, what about the hot tub? Since it's in the remarks at the bottom. Perfect. So, yeah, what about the hot tub? Because in the remarks on the bottom, it says hot tubs included. Okay, good. So here's the thing is, yes, if they're wanting the hot tub, make sure to put it in there. But I would say the reverse also, where it says it's gonna be included, if they do not want it, for whatever reason, they've had bad experiences with hot tubs, they want to use this space where it's at, whatever it is, if they're not wanting it, make sure you put it in section 1.2. Oh, which I got ahead of myself there. I skipped the first. No, we did 1.2. Never mind. We're on the right spot. So, yeah, if they're not wanting the hot tub, make sure you put it in the excluded items on that one. Yep.
Leave that thing there, it's broken.
What's that?
Don't leave that thing is there.
Yeah, if it's broken or whatever, sure. Okay. All right, so then you're gonna have there either are or are not additional items of personal property. If there are, there is a personal property addendum that you would want to use as well. Okay. All right. Excluded, I think.
So, one question, in this, there are not, if they have like a big piece of furniture in the basement. That might apply there, but so far we don't know if the other people might want it. I mean, there's a few things that could be negotiable,
Yeah.
so how do we go about that?
So yeah, great question. So if there was some furniture in the basement that as the buyer's agent, you were looking at it thinking, I don't know how they're ever gonna get this out of the house. Like,
Yes.
so like, it had to have been built here or something. Just make sure you have a conversation and address it. So I would start with just a conversation with the listing agent of saying, hey, are you gonna include, are they planning to leave that? Are they not? If your buyer's like, I don't want it, then make sure you put it in the excluded items.
That they don't want it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That will be to the seller to chop it off or whatever.
Yeah,
Take it
yeah,
out.
exactly. Which, by the way, in fact, if you guys come to tomorrow is Jeremy is doing base camp. He's got a really funny story about getting a desk out of his house that he didn't want to have to take apart. That he used a chainsaw and in the house. So if you go to that, you should say, tell us the story about the chainsaw and your desk. All right. He didn't think about the mess that a chainsaw would make as you cut a desk in half and the sawdust that would go everywhere. Okay.
Also on that 1.2, it does need to be marked, right, or not. You can't leave it.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Yeah, either put there are or there are not on section 1.2. Thank you. Up here, you're either gonna check one or the other. All right, water service. Any concerns there?
Not in this listing, but some other ones might.
Okay, good. Yeah, here's the key thing to just remember on this. So the main thing you want to know, and more so when you're on the listing side than when you're on the buy side. But if you have a property that has water shares or water rights, notice this section says the purchase for the property shall include all water rights or water shares, if any, that are the legal source of the seller's current culinary water service and irrigation water service, if any, to the property. So if there are water shares or water rights, by just the default of this, the buyer's asking for it. So if you're not wanting to include it, you would want to make sure, because then the blank line is basically saying the following water rights or shares, if applicable, are specifically excluded from this sale. So let me give you a quick story on that. I was helping my sister sell a property up in Charleston, which is just kind of outside of Midway by Heber. And when they bought the house that they lived in, you had to have a share of water in order to use any of the water. Well, during the time they lived there, though, the city had come around and put in water meters. So you actually didn't need the water share anymore, or said another way, they could use up to the one share. And if they used above that, then they just had to pay for any water that they used above. Well, my sister decides she wants to sell. So she calls me, says, come and, help us get our property sold. We put it on the market and get an offer. And on the offer, they sent it through just looking just like this. Well, that would mean what?
If they're giving it up, then-
Yeah, that's, my sister would have to include that with the sale of the property. Well, my sister said, well, they don't need it, so I don't want to include it. So, and I had put on the MLS that it was excluded, but they could buy it outside of closing if they wanted. So I did a counter offer and said the purchase does not include the water share that they have, but could be purchased outside of closing if they're interested. The buyer said, we'll get back to you, let you know. I said, okay. The time goes on and the buyer calls me after a few weeks, or the buyer's agent calls me and says, hey, the buyer would like to buy that water share. So I call up my sister. Hey, they would like to buy that water share. And my sister says, oh, well, the neighbor already offered us money. We already sold it to the neighbor, which is fine because it wasn't included.
Right.
But the lesson I learned from that is, like, if you have a scenario where there is water like that, like going forward, like I would say to them, don't go selling it. I mean, it ended up being fine and nothing happened, but it could have created a scenario of them saying, hey, like I said to my sister, you should have given the buyer, use it as a way to negotiate. Go like, hey, but the neighbor wants to buy it, but if you guys want to buy it, we'll sell it to you for whatever. So anyway, so again, on this, just put NA if you're not excluding anything, but if you are excluding, you would write it in that one. Okay? All right, next, purchase price. Any concerns on section 2.1?
Yeah, it doesn't match.
What do you mean it doesn't match?
Isn't it list price is 249, right?
Okay,
That's the offer, right? 249.9.
The E is too high.
okay,
$1,000.
good. So we got two questions here. So one is the list price is 249.9.
Yes.
Do we have to offer the list price?
Oh,
So that's what's happened, is they just made a lower offer, which is fine. But then we go to that next. You said E is too high?
1,000.
Okay. So here's why I did that. Is how this works is whatever they put as earnest money will go towards the down payment or the balance of purchase price and cash itself. So just here's the key thing. When you fill this out, fill it out so that it makes sense. Now, maybe it isn't as crucial today as it has been, but here's kind of what I would say is I see a lot of times agents fill this out and they'll put in the earnest money and then they put TBD for the new loan, TBD for the balance of purchase price and cash at settlement, and then they'll write out whatever the offer amount is. I'm telling you, don't be lazy. Don't be like most agents. Actually put what you think is going to happen. And here's why I say that is, granted, like I said, markets are going to ebb and flow. And maybe in today's market where things are at, maybe it's not as crucial. But I have had scenarios where I ended up getting two offers that were essentially exactly the same, with one exception. One agent put in here TBD, TBD. The other agent put in there how much they were going to put down as a down payment. I've done a lot of bank foreclosure properties where I've helped banks sell their properties and submitted the offers, both of the offers to the bank. The bank looked at it and said they're essentially the same, but the one was putting 20% down. The other one just had TBD. So the bank's like, well, we don't know how much they're going to put down.
What is TBD?
what is it?
Oh, to be determined.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, to be determined. And so what that meant to the bank is we don't know what they're going to do. So we're going to just go with the offer that actually shows how much they're going to put down. So my recommendation is put down what you're going to do. Now, the other thing with this is the buyer is not locked into it. Sometimes I think agents will say the reason they put TBD or to be determined is because the buyer hasn't decided. Are they going to put down 10%, 20%, 5%? Like they haven't decided. Okay, well, do they have the ability to put 20% down If they do, I would write it out as if they were gonna put the 20% down. If they later on change their mind, you don't even have to do an addendum. They can do what the contract says that the buyer can do it in however they want to. They don't even have to go back and get permission. They can modify this. The only caveat to that would be is if they're switching from a conventional loan to an FHA, then you would have to add the FHA VA addendum. But as far as switching how much of a down payment they're gonna do, it's up to them to do. Okay, so what I'm not saying is go make it up and make it look good. I'm not saying that, but if they have the ability to put, if they're trying to decide, we don't know if we're gonna put 10 or 20. We might put 10 and then use the other 10% to fix up the property. Well, if they have the ability to do 20, I would write this out as if they're gonna put down 20%. And then if they change
But
their mind.
at the end, they put 10. Like, I
It's
know,
fine.
I don't wanna put 20, I just.
Yep.
wanna put 10.
Yeah, you're fine, and you wouldn't have to do anything. You don't have to tell the seller that, hey, we changed our mind and we're gonna do 10 instead. So the buyer can change however they want to do it. Okay,
But that money, you don't need to bring it to settlement.
no, they will have to, as settlement, they will need to bring in the money.
Okay.
Yeah, and they'll work with their mortgage company on that. All right. Any other questions on that? All right, we'll keep going then. Any other concerns on the page down here with the initials or anything? All right, we'll assume that's no.
Should they
So
date it?
wait, your
Buyer's initial, should they date it also?
So does have a date here
Okay.
because it was done through dot loop.
So in here, I seen a property that has a PC on the MLS. It says active, it used to say active with a TC.
Yeah.
And the TC was that they needed to sell their property
Correct.
first, so in that case,
Oh, I skipped that part. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
so in that case, it will be, is condition.
Yeah, so we skipped that part. Yeah, section 2.2 is in section 2.2, there's boxes for either is or is not. So it either is or is not conditioned upon the sale of their other home.
Mhm.
And you have to either check one or not the other, either is or it is not. If you check the box that there is, then it also notice it says, if checked in the affirmative, the terms of the attached subject to the sale of the buyer's property addendum apply. So what that means is if you check the box that says is, you automatically need the addendum that is subject to the sale of the buyer's property as well. So yes, thank you for that. All right, next page. And like I said, I'm skipping over a bunch of stuff. Just to go to where the sections that we're gonna fill stuff out, except for, I am gonna stop and talk about section 3.2 real quick. In section 3.2 talks about closing. And in fact, I'm just gonna read it to you real quick and then we'll talk about it. For purposes of the REPC, closing means that A, the settlement has been completed. B, the proceeds of any new loan have been delivered by the lender to the seller or to the escrow closing office. And C, the applicable closing documents have been recorded in the office of the county recorder. The actions described in 3.2 B and C shall be completed no later than 4 calendar days after settlement. Okay, so just keep in mind that once you go in and sign, so, and again, closing means the settlement's been completed, so they've gone in and signed everything. They've brought in any of the funds, which is part of what you were asking, Raul. And then C is it's been recorded. All of that, so B and C have to take place within 4 calendar days of when you sign. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. Sometimes I'll get a call from a newer agent going, they signed, but it hasn't recorded yet, or whatever. And just keep in mind, the funds have to be brought in and the closing has to take place within the 4 calendar days of when settlement happens. Yeah. All right, section 3.3, any concerns there?
Before we move that, it says calendar, not business. Calendar.
Yeah, correct. It's calendar days, not business days. That's right.
The possession,
It was possession.
one say 24 hour after recording and the one say settlement.
Upon reporting.
Okay, so the MLS says upon recording, this says 24 hours. So which one is it gonna be?
It's gonna be that. one.
That was
Gonna be this one. Yep.
Since you give them.
Yep. So, okay, now, there's not a right answer on this. I'll tell you how I do it. And others may do it slightly different, but for me, if the property is vacant, I'm 100% of the time gonna check the box upon recording. Because there's no reason not to. Typically, for me, I will do 24 hours after recording. So what's the difference between 24 hours after recording or 1 calendar day after recording? What would be the difference? Okay, what do you mean?
Because it would start after it records, and so you have to be really, like, I don't personally like that one, because you gotta figure that all out.
Okay, good.
But yeah, so like if you go, if they do recording at 4 o'clock, right, then it starts from that. time
At 4
frame.
o'clock, okay, and what if they do 1 day? When would it be?
It's gonna be at
It would be
5.
5 o'clock.
Good, yeah, that's the difference. So depending on when it records, the clock starts. On the calendar days, it's just gonna be 5 o'clock the next day. Okay, or however many days out. So there's not a right thing, like I know one agent that he puts on there 72 hours, like, sorry. No matter what comes in, if it's his listing, he'll counter back 72 hours. And that's fine, whatever. Like his thinking is, I just don't want the seller to be pushed to get out. So do you know who I'm talking about? Is that what you're laughing
No,
at?
it's just funny how everybody has a little thing.
Yeah, they're little quirks of things. So I know one, actually, I know one other agent who always, he'll counter back 7 days, 7 calendar days after. So, which the last 2 years, people were putting 30 days after or 40, 60 days after. So anyway, those times have changed a little. Let's see what we got here. Oh, same thing on Randy. Yeah, okay. All right, we're gonna keep going down here. Like I said, stop me if you have additional questions on other things, but section 4.2, special assessments. Any concerns there? Should be paid for by the seller. There's one question that usually comes up, so that's why I'm being quiet, waiting for you guys to ask it. If you don't, then I guess I'll just tell you what question usually comes up.
Deadline on time on that?
No?
Is the question the fact of if there is not an HOA? That would come up.
Yes. That's usually what people are gonna say to me here is, well, but this one isn't in an HOA. But what else does it say besides just HOAs?
Municipality.
Or assessed by a municipality or special improvement district. So that's the reason you still want to address this, is even though the property may not be as part of an HOA, there could be a special assessment that comes from a municipality or a special improvement district as well, okay? So for me, I always just check the box for seller. Now, over the past couple of years, you maybe would have said the buyer will pay it, or it'll be split equally or whatever. But I just usually always do seller on that. And then that way the seller's responsible to pay. I have never once had an agent come back to me and say, counter that, to say, oh, the buyer's gonna have to pay it or whatever. I've actually only had one time in my career that it even became an issue, and it was in a scenario I was helping my nephew. All the stories I tell today, I was end up being family members for some reason, and it's actually the son of my sister that I talked about already. But I helped him buy a property, and it came back that there was this special assessment, and the seller was like, well, they were making payments on it, and they just said, we'll just transfer it over to you and you get to keep making the payments. And I said, no, that's not what the contract says. And the listing agent was like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, go read section 4.2. Your seller is responsible, so it's got to come out of their proceeds. And they weren't real happy about it, but that's what happened. So anyway. All right.
So Rose, if they weren't happy about it, couldn't they, counter you and say no money?
So, yeah, before they accepted, if they had seen it, and if they had seen it and thought about it and said, oh, well, hey, we want to be able to transfer this, they would have needed to do a counter offer saying that the buyer would take over the remaining payments or whatever for the assessment, but they didn't. So they got to pay it. All right, section 4.3.
question.
Yes,
So I'm assuming that's with ongoing assessments or anything that's started before the end of, before the sale.
correct. Yeah, if it happens after the sale, yeah,
Then
then it would be the
But in
buyer.
this case, it was an ongoing thing.
Yeah, this one was one that it had happened and the buyer was just making payments on it and they just felt like, oh, we'll just transfer it over for you to quit, to keep making the payments. Nope, sorry. All right. Section 4.3, fees, costs, payment obligations. And then this one does then talk about the HOA. So any concerns there? So for me, again, I just always, when I'm representing the buyer, I just always check the box seller, let them counter us, and I've never had them counter back on any of that. Which, by the way, on that, so this, if a change of ownership fee is due upon the transfer of title from the seller to the buyer, that exchange of ownership fee shall be paid for at settlement by. So I've told you guys this before, I live in a PUD, we have an HOA. And inside of that, my wife happens to actually be the president of the HOA, so this is really helpful when this conversation comes up right now to fighting it. But before she was the president, she was on the board. And the president was like, we should start charging a transfer of title to people who sell their house. And my wife, of course, came home and said, hey, this is what we talked about at our meeting today. And what do you think of that? And I was like, no, like, I don't want them to be doing that. And she was like, well, no, they said that the buyer always pays it. And I was like, no, I said, the way I train my agents too is to check the box to say the seller is going to pay for any transfer of title. And so I just said, go back and say, that's not always true. And, make sure they understand, because I said, what the last thing you want to do is advertise it to the neighborhood of, hey, don't worry about this fee that we're going to start charging because the buyer pays for it. Because I said it most of the time, and granted, again, this ebbs and flows based on what the market's doing, but most of my career, it's been I've checked the box, seller pays it, okay? So. All right. Section 5, any concerns on section 5? I was gonna say, Evelyn's shaking her head, I'm counting. You're just trying to be quiet and let them find it, right? Okay. Any concerns?
The buyer brokers is not, each side is representing the buyer and the last one is not.
Okay, good. Now, and I don't know if this is still happening, but for years and years and years, like, that was the most common error. And I think I finally figured out what it was. And I don't, are you seeing it still or no? That people missed that one? Well, so, because what was happening, what I figured out that happened, and I found this actually by chance, but I had started to notice that every contract that I would review that newer agents had filled out, well, actually just any agent, I was seeing that filled out, it would miss checking that box right here. This, I keep forgetting about the people on Zoom, right here, this box. And I was like, why does everybody miss that? And one day I was filling out a contract and I went back, so here's why I'm saying this. One of the things that I recommend that you do is once you've filled out the contract, before you send it in .loop or have your client sign it, just look through and make sure you've gotten everything, which goes back to what Shanice, right?
Yeah.
Was saying, which is when I was trained, my manager was like, even said, put like a circle inside of the box, like an O or a 0 inside the box, or put an X. And then you can look through it and just make sure you didn't miss anything. Well, so I was filling this out and I went to send it to the client, but I checked right before I did. I scanned through and noticed that the box wasn't checked. And what I found is I was using the MLS to fill out this purchase contract. And for some reason, there was a glitch in the MLS system, and maybe it's still there, I don't know. But that for whatever reason, you would check that box, and then when you hit tab or whatever to go to the next thing, it would uncheck the box. And so I had figured out what it was. So anyway, I leave that here just as a reminder to you of just always go through and scan this before you have your client sign it to make sure, did I miss anything? Okay. Good. All right. Any other concerns on that page? All right. Next page. The only blank line is in section 7 here. Any concerns there? Okay, good. Yeah, so pretty rare that you'll end up putting something on there, but in the event that you were gonna ask for something else, and I know Rob probably already spent a ton of time. Did he spend a ton of time explaining all this section to you guys last week? Yeah, about just, a lot of times agents fill out seller property condition disclosures and send them and feel like they've met the obligation, but you have to do all of this stuff to meet the obligation, okay? So, and then just if there was something else you were gonna ask for, you could throw it on the other line there. Which the thing that I always think about, I guess just for me, that I'll just highlight to you real quick. Is notice in 7E, it says a copy of the most recent minutes, budget and financial statement for the homeowners association. Is, for me, a lot of times, when I'm representing a buyer and the property is part of an HOA, I want to see more than just the most recent minutes. You might want to see like the last 3 months worth of the minutes or something. So you might write that down at the bottom there, or do it on an addendum either way. But to me, I always just because I know, like, for example, inside of our HOA, I mentioned my wife's the president. Well, the last meeting they had, we were out of town. And so I know it was a pretty brief meeting that they had because she's in charge and she wasn't there. So if you got the most recent minutes, you might miss stuff that was talked about in the meeting before that or something, anyway. So I usually just say, probably you want more than just the most recent minutes. All right, section 8.1. Is or is not. Any concerns there? Okay. Then let's go down to 8.2. Any concerns there? All right, anything else on that page? See how fast we did that page? All right. 8.3. Any concerns in section 8.3? So let me just highlight a couple things. On 8.3A, you would check if they're paying cash. 8.3B is if they're getting a loan. And then if you go down to 8.3BI, there's a box in there where that we have here, right here, 0. Okay, any concerns with that? Okay, so again, over the past couple of years, like you were having to put in there that all the earnest money was hard and those type of things, versus I think we're back into a scenario again. If I'm writing an offer today, I'm probably going to put in 0 there. And so what does that mean? What does the 0 there mean?
That's the money that the buyer has to pay before the seller.
Okay, close, really close.
Default after finance.
And I would just take out the word default. If you take out the word default, you're probably going to be okay. So if they cancel the contract based on, if they go past the due diligence deadline, but before the finance and appraisal deadline, and they were to cancel, that's how much of the earnest money they're going to give up. Okay,
Sure.
so
that's usually the contract right now with this market.
well,
Where usually-
I don't know. What are you seeing right now, Evelyn, on most of the offers? Are people doing
Sure.
0 again?
Yeah, most of them are.
Okay, yeah, I would just say anytime that it's more of a, I mean, and I wouldn't say we're in a buyer's market, it's pretty flat, but if it's a seller's market, which is what we've been the last 2 years, if I'm representing the seller, I would be saying, no, if you cancel after due diligence, you're giving up some earnest money. Like, you need some skin in. That's the hard part on this. If I'm representing the buyer, I want 0 in there. If I'm representing the seller, I want, like, give me some of the money if you're gonna cancel, So you just have to negotiate it based on what's happening. And like I say, depending on where the market is, sometimes you're just grateful to get an offer, and yeah, we'll give you your earnest money back all the way till whenever, just to have a chance, but.
Question, just on a similar note.
Yeah.
What are samples of ways sellers can get out of the contract?
Okay,
I just,
what did you say?
And then pretty much none.
Yeah, the only one,
One.
well, there is one. There has to be damage done to the property that exceeds 10% of the property's value, and then the seller could cancel. So they just gotta burn the house. And then they can cancel.
Or the act of God, the act of God. thing.
Basically.
The Dodd-Frank, is that what
Or
you're-
I said the act of God.
Oh, an act of
That
God,
phrase.
yes. Yeah, basically is it, they're, as far as the way this contract is written. The only out the seller has is if there was more than 10% damage done to the property, a flood, a fire, a baseball bat, I guess, I don't know. Then either the buyer or the seller could cancel. Outside of that, there's really nothing. So now you could do an addendum and add some things, you know. But so like, for example, the seller could say it's subject to me finding a property. And then if I don't find the property by a certain date, then they could cancel. Then you could, but the way the boilerplate of this contract is. The only out the seller has is go destroy the property. Probably is not worth doing. All right. So 8.4, any concerns here? Okay. So what do the rest of you think?
Again, number and addendum.
Well, no, so sorry, we're in 8.4,
Oh,
not
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Jumping ahead.
8.4. Any concern? Well, I have one. Any other concerns or disagree with
The number that's much or am I wrong?
8.4?
Like,
So actually, what you're thinking of was in section 2, it said the earnest money was 1,000.
Yeah.
This would be additional earnest money.
Oh, addition.
Yeah. You guys are okay with it?
It says will not, and then there's additional money.
Yeah.
So it should have been like or will.
Which, so I kind of wonder a little bit though,
The wrong
like.
box.
Is there anything wrong with that though? I'm just saying, we will not give you an additional $500.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, on the, isn't it, go back and refer to, oh, wait, maybe it doesn't. I thought it referred to section 2.
But it's a wrong box.
If the REPC has not been previously canceled by the buyers provided in 8.1 or 8.2.
See, so on, on section 2 of the REPC, if you look at additional earnest money,
It doesn't have any.
it says see section 8.4 if applicable.
Yeah.
It's listed 0, but then you have 500, so that would be.
So that's where, yeah, so that is where it would be
Yeah.
contract increase. So anyway, yeah, so the main thing is like, just if you're putting money in there, check the will box. Like that's, I mostly was doing is like, don't try
Don't do
to-
it to make it look like.
to make it look like you
Yeah.
are. Yeah, make it look like, hey, we're gonna give you, we're not gonna give you 500. We're not gonna give you $500. Okay, section 9. Now you can bring up the section 9 part. What was the concern?
There's no numbered addendum,
Yeah, so,
but we have one.
yeah, so
Indeed.
on the contract, this box should be checked and should have addendum number there along with the FHA meeting. Good. All right, section 10, concerns here. Will or will not, paid for or ordered by the buyer, selected by the buyer, paid for by the seller. Yeah, that's how I typically do this. And again, this will vary based on the market. Again, past couple of years, you would have had to put in there ordered by the buyer, selected by the buyer, probably paid for by the buyer. We're back to a scenario where you can go back and say, okay, we want you to pay for a home warranty for us. And then just the amount's gonna vary based on what home warranty company you're using. And probably,
600.
yeah, I was gonna say, it's probably. From when I created this till today, I probably would do more like 600. Yeah. Okay. All right, any other concerns on that page or questions?
So you're saying that, you are saying then that right now is mostly the seller and not the buyer. I will be doing that.
That's how I would do it, yes, is I would ask the seller to pay for the home warranty in today's market. Yep. All right, keep going down here then. Like I said, stop me if you have any other questions. Section 15, mediation. Will or shall or may?
Sure.
Okay, I have 2 shalls.
I not,
What do the rest of you think? Shall or may?
That's what you talked about May.
It's May
A little
and-
softer, gives them the option.
Okay,
It will be made because that's not the option of them, right?
okay, so now we have 2 mays, so 2 shalls, 2 mays, what do the rest of you have?
Shall.
Another shall? May, okay, so we're pretty split, okay, good. So here, let me tell you how, so. I trained at a different company before I came here and. I was training this stuff and then the company hired an on-staff attorney, so we had an attorney that was on staff. And I was teaching the class one day and he came into the class and he said, hey, wait a minute, you're teaching that wrong. And I said, oh, okay, what should I teach? And he said, you should teach this that they should check the box of May. And I said, okay, so I started training it as May. Well, then that attorney left and went and got another job somewhere else and we hired a new attorney and he came into class. And I said, okay, guys, you should check the box of May. And after the class, he goes, hey, wait a minute, you're teaching that wrong. And I said, okay, what should I teach? And he said, you should teach that they shall. And I said, okay. So then I started teaching shall. Taught for a long time. That guy left, new attorney comes in and goes, hey, you're teaching that wrong. And I go, all right, what should I teach? And I like his answer better. Here's what he said. You should explain to the client what shall means and what may means, and then let them decide. And I was like, ooh, I like that. Okay, so now that's how I've been training it for the last, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years. Is here's what you want to do, because here's why. There are times when you're gonna, and this is how I explain it to my clients. There are times where you're gonna wish you had checked shall. There are other times where you're gonna wish you had checked may. And so I guess the question for you as the client is, do you want to say you absolutely will go to mediation before going to close or to the court? Or do you want to just have the option and hey, if we both agree, we will. If we don't, then we can go to court. And here's the challenge. What do you think most disputes over this contract? What do buyers and sellers end up disputing the most? Yeah, what money? Typically the earnest money. And granted, this, again, this may even have changed a little bit too, as this has gone up. But if we did $1,000 in earnest money and the buyers and sellers check the box of shall, and we're now going to have a fight over this earnest money, and you're going to go to court over it, even if it's small claims court, I guess, a judge is going to look at it and say, you checked that you would go to mediation. Have you guys been to mediation? Well, no. Okay, we'll go to mediation first, which I say that a little loosely because really, to some extent, that's what, I guess it's not mediation, more arbitration, small claims court. But they would look at it and say, your contract says you have to go to mediation first, go to mediation first.
1,000.
Yeah, so you're not going to fight over $1,000 and go to mediation that might cost you $500 or $600. So like, that's where to me, you kind of want to like it. I don't know the right answer is now what I guess I'm saying to you is, do you do shall or do you do may? Really, it's just explaining to the client of, do you want to say we have to go to mediation or do you want just the option to go? And the problem is they're usually going to say, well, I don't know. What do you think?
That's right.
So, you know, unfortunately, I'm not part of the contract, so it doesn't really matter what I think. So you have to decide. But me personally, if I was doing it, I probably am going to check the may box. Now, that doesn't mean that's the right answer. I'm just saying for me, I just feel like that's probably what I would do. So explain it to your client, let them decide, but check one or the other, either shall or.
Now, if you say that, Rose, and something happens, and they say, well, you said that.
I said that's what I do. I didn't say that's what you should do.
That's true. Cover your bases.
That is why I say it as like, I can tell you how I do it, but that doesn't mean, but here's the problem. Like I said, depending on the scenario, they may wish they had checked shall. There may be other scenarios you wish you had checked may. So I don't know. There's not really a right answer on that one.
Yes, no.
Just what?
Don't
Don't fight. Yeah, don't fight. That's the better answer. We should have a third box. Don't fight. All right. Any other concerns on this page?
I just have a comment on that, what I had.
Yes.
most of the time, a judge is gonna make you mediate anyways, so my understanding of that, of why I've been trained to mark shall is because it's already gonna be an emotional problem at that point between the two parties, so if you mark it as may, then you have a whole nother,
Hold on,
Problem.
problem. Okay, cool.
so just a thought to.
Yeah, and like I said, there's not a. Where, what I learned from 3 different attorneys, like, do this, do that, no, do neither, I'm like, all right, whatever, so, anyway. So, yeah, but that's just it, you as I think it through, even though I say I would probably do may. There are times that I'm like, no, I probably would do shall, so.
Yeah.
All right, what did we miss, Evelyn? What's your job?
The buyers and.
Good. So yeah, on this one, notice that we missed it. So again, just a reminder, before you send the contract out, scan it, make sure you didn't miss anything. All right. On the dates now. Well, actually, first, before that, I know Rob probably did this, but it's helpful to do it again. Section 23, acceptance. What has to happen for acceptance to occur?
Settlement.
No, not for acceptance.
Oh,
What has to happen for acceptance to occur?
Deadlines have to do that.
Okay, so in 23A, it says seller or buyer have signed the offer or the counter offer. And B, communicated to the other party's agent that it's been signed. Okay, so in order for you to have a fully executed contract, it's got to be signed and communicated in order for it to be an accepted. Sorry, not executed, but accepted. It's got to be signed and communicated, and that communicated could be to the other party or their agent. What happens if you can't get a hold of the agent? I would send them a text, I'd leave a voicemail, and then I would even call their broker and just say, hey, I just wanted to let you know we've accepted this offer. Okay,
Isn't perhaps an email sufficient?
could do an email too. So yeah, they're just,
I mean, in other words, I would send email and just say, try to call them, hey, Bob, by the way, check your email, we've accepted.
yeah, that would be okay as well. Yeah. So the key thing though is my only concern with I send an email is what if you sent me the email and I called you and said, hey, we're withdrawing our offer. And you said, oh, well, I already sent an email that communicated that we've accepted. Well, I never got an email. So here's the answer.
Check spam.
If I'm calling you, when you answer the phone, say, we accepted. Before you even say your name. All right. I'm kind of kidding, but in the event somebody was calling you to say, we accepted, and you said, hey, we withdraw our offer. If you did that before, it would happen. All right. So contract deadlines, any concerns there?
These are just guidelines.
So here's what I will say. I just kind of threw dates in here, but I will give you how I'm going to tell you 2 different ways. I'm going to tell you the way that I see most people do it, and I'm going to tell you the way I would do it. Here's what I see most people do. Most people look at these dates and do something like this. They will do 7 days from the day they're writing the offer, 14 days from when they're doing the offer, 21 days from when they're doing the offer, and then 28 or 30. Like sometimes, for whatever reason, people do 7, 14, 21, 28. Just kind of just think of it as in sevens, I guess. Which fine, you can do that. I'm going to tell you how I do it, because who do I represent if I'm filling this out? The buyer, right? So I want to fill this out in the buyer's favor. So here's how I typically do it. I usually will put on the seller disclosure deadline, I usually will do between 3 and 5 days from the date that I'm filling out the purchase contract. And the way I decide between it, am I doing 3 or 5, is somewhat on, is there a holiday or a weekend that's playing into it? And or if I feel like we're going to have to negotiate this and might go back and forth for a couple of days, then I'm probably going to do more like 5 days. If I feel like it's a clean, straightforward offer, it's in the middle of the week or start of the week, I might just say, no, I'm going to put it 3 days. Does that make sense? So somewhere between 3 and 5 days. For me, I usually do the due diligence deadline. I usually do 10 to 14. Now, again, this will vary based on the market again, but where we're at today, and most of the time, I'm going to do 10, somewhere between 10 and 14 days. And again, Am I doing 10 or 14 is gonna depend on, do I feel like it's gonna take a few days to negotiate? Which, by the way, let me make sure to clarify something. I'm not writing in here 3 to 5 days, 3 days after, like I'm putting an actual date. Make sure you do that. There was a time back in 2000, and I don't even know if I can remember the date. There was a time our contract was worded that way. So many days after acceptance, so many days after due diligence, and it was a mess. So don't do that. I still will, from time to time, you'll see people that will do that. 3 days after acceptance, 10 days after, like, don't do that. Put actual dates. But so the date that I'm usually gonna put in is gonna be somewhere between 10 and 14 days from when I'm writing. And again, I'm doing that based on holidays, weekends, whatever. I'm just looking at a calendar. Next, when I get down here to finance and appraisal deadline and settlement deadline, one of the things that I do clear back here, so let's go clear back to section, I think it was 9 is where, nope, not 9, sorry, 4. Is that, nope, 3.3, sorry. Possession. When I get to possession with my client, when I get, so clear back here, when we were filling it out, I would have asked my client, when do you want to move in? Okay. So that's how I'm gonna decide then on my dates back down here in section 24 is based on when do they want to move into the property. And then from there, I'm gonna back into those dates for finance and appraisal deadline and settlement. So for me, here's how I do it. If they were wanting to move in, let's say on a Saturday, then I'm probably gonna put my settlement deadline to be the Monday or the Tuesday before that Saturday. Because remember I told you about closing, that it has to be within 4 days of settlement? Like most of the time you go in and sign and the next day it'll fund and record and then get the keys based on what you put in possession. But it's possible that it could take up to the 4 days. So for me, if I know they want to move in on a weekend, I'm usually going to put my settlement deadline to be the Monday or the Tuesday before that weekend. Because is the buyer ever going to complain if they get the keys early? Like, are they going to complain of like, hey, you got me the keys on Thursday and we weren't ready for them until Friday? Like, they're not going to complain. Are they ever going to complain though if they thought they were going to get the keys on Friday so they could move in Saturday morning and now you don't get them until Monday?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's why for me, I usually do that. Now, so I'm gonna put my settlement deadline that way. Then my appraisal, finance and appraisal deadline. How many days before you go to settlement does the mortgage company have to give the buyer this closing disclosures? You remember? 14, 10 to 14? Less. Less than that. It's, yeah, 3 days before, and Sundays don't count, but Saturdays do count, blah, blah, blah. So for me, I usually do my finance, because remember, who do I represent? The buyer. So I usually will put my finance and appraisal deadline to be whatever 3 calendar days, not counting the Sunday, in front of the settlement deadline. So if I was closing on Monday, or let's say Tuesday, then I'm probably going to put that Friday of being the finance and appraisal deadline. So rather than the 7, 14, 21, 28, I back in and first figure out when my settlement deadline is going to be. Then I will back it the 3 days, not counting Sunday, to that's when my finance, because what I know is if they have sent out the closing disclosures, we're probably going to be fine. But if on that day, I called the lender and said, hey, if you sent out the closing disclosure and they go, oh no, we probably don't get it sent for another day, I now know there's a problem. Okay, make sense? So that's how I do it. Any questions? All right. Next, offer and time for acceptance. Any concerns there? All right, well, let me tell you how I handle this then. So here's what I do is remember I said I will call the listing agent and ask a few questions. One of the questions that I ask when I call to say, hey, we're going to be writing an offer is I would be calling and saying, hey, Luz, we're going to be writing an offer on your listing. If I get it to you by 2 o'clock today, how much time would you need to get a response from your seller?
By 2 o'clock today?
Yeah, if I send it to you at 2, well, no, if I send you the offer at 2, how long would you need to be able to get with your seller and get back to me on a response?
On this time,
Yes,
so I will have a couple, more than a couple of hours,
we don't know, how many do you want?
a day at least.
You need a whole day? Like,
Maybe.
this is really
It
what-
depends. on
Okay,
the
but that's,
seller.
I would be calling and just saying, like, how much time do you need? If she said a day, I would say, are you, what, can you not get with your client today?
Yes,
You can. Okay, so if I gave you till 10 o'clock tonight, would that be okay?
yes.
Okay, good. So here's the point. Here's why I do that. I'm gonna call and find out how much time do you need to get with your client and give me an answer? Because I don't want this to be any longer than I need it to be. Here's why. On the listing side, if you sent me the offer and you gave me a day, as soon as I get the offer, I'm gonna call my client and say, hey, I got an offer. When do you want to get together and talk about it? Great. As soon as I hang up with that, I'm gonna call every agent who's shown the property recently and be saying, Jocelyn, we just got an offer. You showed the house just yesterday to some clients. We just got an offer. If they're interested, let them know they need to give me an offer by such and such date. Like, I go out and try to generate another offer. It's amazing how many times you can do that and get somebody, because it's almost like once, if a buyer's like, we kind of liked it. As soon as they find out somebody else has made an offer, it's amazing how it like creates this like competition of like, oh, well, that must be a good house then. And we want, like, I've generated a lot of multiple offers doing that. So as a result, when I'm on the buyer side, I don't want to give you a ton of time to go do that against me. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's why you wanted the less time.
That's right. That's why I want less. I want to give you less time. I want to give you enough time. Like, don't hear me that way. But I don't, I don't want to.
But that's what I wanted the day.
Well, I know you do, but that's why I might say, well, so why do you need a whole day? And if they said, there are times when they say, well, my client actually just barely went to work and they work a 12-hour shift and I'm not gonna be able to get to them. Okay, that makes sense. Then that's what I would do. So, all right. Next, any concerns on the signature or initials or anything here?
I got a question. It's
Yeah.
hypothetical.
Okay.
So if the date goes and they don't accept. Make sure I understand this right. They pass the deadline, but to say the seller and buyer still want to work with each other. You don't have to create a whole new contract. You just, we're gonna continue on.
If it lasts.
Okay, great question. So, yeah, what he's saying is, if we got past, so let's say that we sent it over and they didn't sign it by 8 o'clock. But at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, they were like, oh yeah, we do want to accept that offer. Right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
So,
And if they were the only offer, maybe the seller says, okay, we still want to work with you. Yeah.
okay.
Where does that fall?
So yeah, if that were to happen, so it's a little bit of it depends is kind of the answer. And here's what I mean is if the seller just went and signed it after this time frame, then we have to do something to fix it. If though, let's say that the seller got it and said, let's say that they got it and at 8 o'clock, they were still like, I don't know. Or maybe even they're like, I don't know, I need to sleep on it and we'll call you in the morning. So they sleep on it, they call you in the morning, go, yeah, we want it, but we want to counter it back to, instead of 247, let's do 248. If you then just checked the boxes here and said counter offer, addendum number 3 or whatever. And then on that addendum said purchase price to be 248 and send it over and they accept it, you don't have to do anything. It's all good. If though you just signed, if they check the box acceptance, signed it and dated it the next morning at a certain time, what are you going to tell them they need to do, Evelyn?
That it's not fully executed. Even if they were to sign it like at 8:01, we would return it and be like, you don't have power.
So what do they have to do to fix it?
They have to counter or addend it.
Yes, you'd have to do an addendum saying offer and time for acceptance was extended until 8:01. Or 8:05 or something. So yeah, if you go past, so here's the key thing. As soon as you go past 8 o'clock, the offer's lapsed. It's gone. It's off the table. If you did a counter offer, though, anytime you do a counter offer, it's like a brand new offer. So when you do a counter offer, that would essentially takes the place of extending that. But if you accepted it after, then you would have to do an addendum saying the buyer and seller agree the offer and time for acceptance to be extended until, October 11th at 10 a.m. or whatever. Does that make sense? Answer? Good. All right. FHAVA addendum. Any concerns on the date? Which notice it says with an offer reference date of, so we got that good. The buyer, the seller, the address, any concerns? Yeah. Was that just too obvious or what? Like, are you guys bored to death? You're not even paying attention to me anymore, like what's? All right, yeah, miss the address in here, right? Okay. Buyer does or does not intend to occupy the property. Good there. Any concerns on section 3? Okay, so what is it? Here's how I'm testing it. What does that mean? What does section 3 mean?
Seller would pay at least up to $500 if they need to do one proceeds.
Yeah, so if for some reason under the FHA appraisal, they were to require something, what kinds of things is FHA going to require as part of the appraisal?
Try a lot.
Okay,
I mean, small repairs like that.
okay.
Railing.
Yeah, the number one that happens is a railing going down the stairs. Like that's the number one thing I think that
Or
always
the
comes.
straps on the water here.
Or straps on a water heater is probably number 2. So in the event the FHA appraisal came back and said the seller needs to strap down the water heater, the amount you've put in there, this buyer and seller have just already agreed. The seller will spend up to $500 to fix any of those things. If it ends up being more than that, then the seller wouldn't have to do it, but then you're also not going to get the deal done. So they don't. Section 4 is saying in the event that there ends up being termites in the property, that the seller will spend up to $500 to get rid of them. Do we have termites in Utah?
Very rare.
Yeah, we do. It's just pretty rare. I've had 2 times on contracts that when the termite inspector went out, said they could see evidence of potential termites. But both times, once there was a cardboard box in a dirt basement. The other time it was a piece of wood that was on a dirt in the basement. And they said, just get rid of those and you're good. And so we got rid of them, we're good. So they didn't say that there was termites, but just said possibly could have, essentially. Yeah. All right, section 1 or section 5.1. What's that amount for? All right, it's either I'm asking too simple a questions, you are bored, you're tired, you're whatever. So, well, that's the amount you're gonna ask the seller to pay towards buyer's closing costs. So if you're asking the seller to pay buyer's closing costs, which again, we haven't had that for the last couple of years, but it's back, this is where you would put it in if it's an FHA loan. You're gonna put it in here, okay? All right.
Well,
I got a great story to wake you up here.
Does it have to be that amount? How about
Oh.
if the seller says, well, I'm just want to do 5,000?
Yeah,
Does he
so
have to
if
do that?
so if I sent this over, which I would be asking for that amount, if the seller says, no, I only want to do 5,000, they would need to do a counter offer back to me.
If you ask the seller to down the point of the interest rate, where you put it,
That
You-
would
right
be
there.
part of
is that one?
Yep, you'd put it in right there if
it.
you were
That
asking to
first
pay.
line right there, the seller shall contribute a settlement amount towards schema of loan discount points.
Yeah.
That's what it's talking
Yep.
about.
Perfect. All right, any concerns on page 2 here? Take that as a. All right, last page, we're almost done. Any concerns on addendum 1? We've got it checked as addendum, 9th day of October. The buyer, seller. Street address.
Full address, right?
Yeah, put the full address, good. How about section 1? Any concerns there?
Yeah, that's a horrible way to write that.
Yes. So how should you write it? What should you say? Yeah, probably I would say, don't put something about, that's gonna offend the person. So basically, what I would say is you would want to put some, seller to have the carpets professionally cleaned. Spending up to a certain dollar amount, or to use this particular carpet cleaning company, whatever. Just don't, I would say, don't put in something about their,
Needs to be, like something about getting a copy of it, so that's bad.
yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So let me give you a funny story real quick. So and I don't know if it's really that funny, but like I gotta lower the bar for you. So maybe it's funny, because otherwise you'd be like, yeah. Well. So when I was at Coldwell Banker and running the training program at Coldwell Banker, I would train the agents, and part of the training program, we did this same kind of a thing somewhat. But as part of the training program, they were part of the training program, which meant you kept coming to these classes over and over again until an agent would get 6 closings. So until you got 6 closings, you just kept coming to trainings. Yeah. But once they got the 6 closings, they didn't have to come anymore. And so we would call that graduation. They had graduated from our training program. Well, one day, and I would review every one of the contracts for all of the agents. So a lot of the stuff that I refer to came from, like, here's where I would see these, because every agent that was in the training program, when they wrote an offer, before they could submit it, they were supposed to let me look at it so that I could make sure they didn't get their clients in trouble, which I'm happy to do that for you guys as well, when you write a contract to look at it. But so I get it, and I'm looking, this agent though didn't let me look at it. And I get it after it's executed by the seller. And it was a property in Park City. So we get it, and I'm reading through, and I get to the addendum, and I start to read the addendum. And it says in the addendum, buyer and seller agree this contract closing will graduate, and then it had the agent's name in, from the training program. And I was like, I just started laughing, because I was like, well, I guess he's done then. Like, the buyer and seller agreed, so I guess he's graduated from our training. Like, he did not want to come to class anymore, apparently. That's not the funny part. So the guy then ends up leaving Utah. Like I called him up and I was like, hey, FYI, you still haven't gotten 6 closings. So even though their buyer and seller agreed, you still got to keep coming because you haven't got your. So he ends up then leaving. Not because of this, but down the road, he ends up leaving the state, moves. So he comes, says, hey, I'm getting out of real estate. I'm leaving the state. Okay. Couple years go by. We get a phone call at the office, and the front desk answers the phone, and they said, I need to talk to whoever was the broker of, and then says this guy's name. And so the front office lady calls me up, says, hey, there's a phone call. They want to talk to the broker of whoever this guy's broker was. Do you want to talk to him? And I say, yeah, I'll talk to him. That's fine. So I answer the phone. Hey, this is Russ. Can I help you? And she says, yeah, this is so-and-so. We bought a home from you guys, she said, back in whatever year it was. And she says, this particular guy just came and knocked on our door. And I was like, okay, like I'm thinking, okay, so what? She goes, and he said, I'm in town from out of state. I was the agent that had this home listed when you guys bought it. Could I take a shower?
What? Are you kidding me? Really?
No. And she was like, that is so what? Like basically just went off. And I go, yeah, we don't have him working here anymore for that reason. He was weird. Like, but he was just in town and was kind of like, I need to take a shower. I'll just go knock on their door. And hey, I was the listing agent. Can I use your shower? Don't do that kind of stuff. All right, last thing we're going to talk about here. In this addendum, any concerns down here with the offer and time for acceptance on this addendum?
Is this a different time than the contract because it's an.
It's an hour.
Okay, good, good. So notice this one says buyer or the seller shall have until 9 PM. The other said 8 PM. So what is it? Is it 8 or is it 9?
Oh, it's the addendum, so it's gonna be 9, right?
Okay, good. Why? You're right.
Because they modified it with the addendum.
Okay, good. So here's the key thing. Notice right here, it says to the extent the terms of this addendum modify or
Yes.
conflict, which so in this case, they're conflicting, right? With any provision of the REPC, including all prior addenda and counteroffer, these terms shall control. So anytime, the reason I point that out is anytime you have any type of a conflict between the contract and an addendum, go look at which one was last, and whatever one took place last is in control. Yep,
It's like it cancels the other one, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
So now you could argue on this one, though. When I did this, in fact, it's probably time to update this and do a new one because of how far away and prices and all that you guys have already brought up. I mean, you'll notice down here, the date and time are exactly the same. I wish I had waited 1 more minute to sign this, because then this one would have been last. You would have been able to clearly see it was last, but it doesn't have it only has the hour and minutes on it. It doesn't have the like seconds, but
Rush been using the same thing since.
I know since
2017.
2017, I know. I know, it's time to update it, right?
I mean, how many years is that?
I know, it still works.
Yeah.
So, okay, questions?
I'm just not quite sure on that. So they could accept the main contract, the REPC at 8 o'clock, but then they can still accept this at 9?
No,
Or is it all together at 9?
altogether, because of this, so again, assuming this addendum took place was the last one, then this actually would change all of the other two saying 8 o'clock, this would change those to being 9 o'clock. So don't write one this way, like put the same time on all of them. But I just did that so that we could talk about to the extent the terms of this addendum modify or conflict. So if you ever have a conflict between what the contract says and what an addendum says, this one will control, the later one, the last one will control. Make sense? Okay. All right, thank you all for being here. So Thursday, we will do the fire packet. So we'll do kind of the same thing we did last Thursday with the seller one. We're gonna do the same thing with the buyer packet on Thursday. So thanks for being here. Have a great day.